October 14th, 1944. Imperial Japanese Navy Headquarters, Tokyo. The photograph trembled slightly in Rear Admiral Matome Ugaki's weathered hands as he studied what remained of the heavy cruiser Kumano after encountering American naval gunfire off Formosa 3 days earlier. "This cannot be from naval artillery alone," he wrote in his classified damage assessment report. No battleship guns could achieve such concentrated destruction at these ranges while maintaining such precision. Through his office windows overlooking Tokyo Bay, Ugaki could see the skeletal remains of Japanese shipyards, testimony to American air superiority. Yet here, in this grainy reconnaissance photograph, lay evidence of something far more devastating than anything Japanese naval doctrine had prepared them to face. The shell craters photographed along Kumano's superstructure measured nearly 3 meters across. Each impact had penetrated armor plate that should have deflected any known naval projectile, creating holes large enough for a man to walk through upright. The armor-piercing shells responsible for this destruction weighed over 1,200 kilograms each, fired from guns so massive that their existence challenged every assumption Japanese naval engineers had made about the practical limits of shipboard artillery. What Ugaki and his staff were examining represented their first clear evidence of American Iowa-class battleship firepower in action. The 9 16-inch guns of these vessels could hurl projectiles weighing as much as a small automobile across distances exceeding 40 kilometers, with accuracy that defied everything Japanese naval experience suggested was possible. When multiplied across the growing American battleship fleet, this firepower represented a level of naval combat capability that Japanese shipyards could never match, and Japanese tactical doctrine had never contemplated. The transformation from confident naval supremacy to technological desperation had accelerated throughout 1944 as American industrial capacity reached full mobilization. Japanese naval intelligence, operating from increasingly fragmented reports and diminishing reconnaissance capabilities, had struggled to assess the true scale of American shipbuilding achievements. The numbers, when Japanese analysts finally compiled accurate estimates, suggested construction rates that seemed impossible for any nation to sustain while simultaneously fighting a global war across multiple theaters. But the evidence now spread across Ugaki's desk told a different story. The Americans had not merely built more ships, they had built better ships, incorporating advances in metallurgy, fire control systems, and naval gunnery that represented generational leaps beyond anything Japanese naval science had achieved. The 16-inch guns that had savaged Kumano were merely the most visible manifestation of American naval technological superiority that extended across every aspect of warship design and construction. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The psychological impact of this revelation would prove more devastating to Japanese naval confidence than any single battle defeat. These were not theoretical projections or intelligence estimates derived from intercepted communications. This was physical evidence of American naval capabilities captured in stark black and white photographs that documented destruction beyond anything Japanese naval forces had previously encountered. The shell impacts on Kumano's hull told a story of American technological advancement that Japanese naval doctrine could not counter and Japanese industry could not match. The journey from supremacy to obsolescence had begun 18 months earlier, when the first Iowa-class battleships entered Pacific combat operations. USS Iowa herself had completed her shakedown cruise in August 1943 and deployed to the Pacific Fleet in January 1944. Her sister ships USS New Jersey, USS Missouri, and USS Wisconsin followed in rapid succession, each representing the pinnacle of American naval engineering applied to the traditional battleship concept. These vessels displaced over 57,000 tons at full load, making them among the largest warships ever constructed. But their size alone understated their revolutionary capabilities. The Iowa class incorporated technological advances that transformed the battleship from a slow-moving gun platform into a fast, heavily armored warship capable of keeping pace with aircraft carrier task forces while delivering unprecedented firepower at extreme ranges. The main battery of 9 16-inch, 50-caliber guns represented the most powerful naval artillery ever mounted on an American warship. Each gun measured over 20 meters in length and weighed approximately 139 tons without its turret mounting. The complete turret assembly, including armor protection and ammunition handling systems, weighed over 1,700 tons, heavier than many complete Japanese destroyers. These guns fired two primary types of ammunition, each designed for specific tactical applications that Japanese naval planners had never anticipated facing. The armor-piercing round, designated Mark 8, weighed 1,270 kilograms and could penetrate over 760 millimeters of steel armor at 20 kilometers range. The high-capacity round, designated Mark 13, weighed 862 kilograms and carried nearly 70 kilograms of high explosives for use against lightly armored targets and shore installations. The ballistic performance of these projectiles exceeded anything in Japanese naval experience. Maximum range with standard charges approached 42 kilometers, allowing Iowa-class battleships to engage targets beyond the visual horizon while remaining outside the effective range of most Japanese naval artillery. Muzzle velocity approached 850 meters per second, imparting kinetic energy sufficient to penetrate the heaviest armor protection Japanese naval architects had ever designed. But perhaps most significantly for Japanese tactical planners attempting to counter this threat, the rate of fire approached 2 rounds per gun per minute under optimal conditions. 9 guns firing in coordinated salvos could deliver 18 1,200-kilogram projectiles every minute, creating a weight of fire that no Japanese warship could survive if caught within effective range. Japanese naval construction had followed different design philosophies that emphasized speed and firepower over armor protection, reflecting strategic requirements for operations across the vast Pacific distances. The Yamato-class battleships represented Japan's attempt to counter American naval construction with the largest guns ever mounted on any warship, 18.1-inch weapons capable of firing projectiles weighing over 1,400 kilograms. But these massive vessels, while individually powerful, could not be produced in quantities sufficient to challenge American naval superiority. Japan completed only 2 Yamato-class battleships during the war, Yamato and Musashi, with a third vessel, Shinano, converted to an aircraft carrier before completion. American shipyards, meanwhile, completed 4 Iowa-class battleships between 1943 and 1944, while simultaneously constructing dozens of aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels. The industrial mathematics were inescapable to anyone who understood naval construction requirements. Each Iowa-class battleship required approximately 3 years to construct using the most advanced shipbuilding techniques American industry could deploy. Japanese naval construction, operating under constant air attack and severe material shortages, required 4 to 5 years to complete vessels of equivalent complexity. American shipyards were completing major warships faster than Japanese industry could replace losses while maintaining superior quality and incorporating more advanced technology. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, the officer who had commanded the carrier strike force at Pearl Harbor and Midway, reviewed these industrial comparisons in classified briefings conducted at Combined Fleet Headquarters throughout the summer of 1944. The strategic implications were devastating for Japanese planning. American naval construction rates meant that Japanese forces would face increasingly overwhelming numerical disadvantage, regardless of tactical success in individual engagements. More troubling for Japanese naval doctrine, the Iowa-class battleships represented tactical capabilities that Japanese naval theory had declared impossible to achieve. American naval architects had solved the fundamental design problem that had limited battleship effectiveness since the early 20th century: the trade-off between speed, armor, and firepower. Traditional naval architecture required compromising one characteristic to optimize the others. The Iowa class achieved previously incompatible design goals through advances in propulsion, metallurgy, and structural engineering that Japanese naval science had not mastered. Steam turbines, producing over 212,000 shaft horsepower, drove these vessels at speeds exceeding 33 knots, fast enough to operate with aircraft carrier task forces while maintaining formation integrity during high-speed maneuvering. Armor protection approached 406 mm over vital areas, including the main battery turrets, conning tower, and machinery spaces. This protection scheme could defeat the armor-piercing projectiles of any Japanese naval gun at normal battle ranges, maintaining the structural integrity needed for sustained high-speed operations in heavy seas. The combination of speed, armor, and firepower created tactical advantages that Japanese naval doctrine could not counter effectively. Iowa-class battleships could close to optimal firing range faster than opposing forces could withdraw, maintain position during extended engagements regardless of enemy maneuvering, and deliver sustained firepower at ranges where Japanese vessels could not effectively respond. Japanese naval intelligence struggled to assess these capabilities accurately through the fragmented reporting available in 1944. Many Japanese commanders refused to believe intelligence estimates of American battleship performance, assuming that reports were exaggerated by demoralized field commanders seeking to explain tactical defeats. The idea that American naval technology could exceed Japanese capabilities contradicted decades of Japanese naval doctrine and professional pride. Captain Tamechi Hara, commanding the destroyer Shigure and one of Japan's most experienced surface warfare officers, encountered Iowa-class firepower during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. His post-engagement report, classified until after the war, provided Japanese naval headquarters with their first detailed account of American battleship capabilities from an experienced tactical commander. The American battleships engaged our formation at ranges exceeding 30 kilometers, Hara wrote in his action report. Their fire control appeared to use radar systems that could track our movements despite darkness and weather conditions that prevented visual observation. The accuracy of their fire at such extreme ranges exceeded anything in Japanese naval experience. Salvos arrived with mechanical precision, requiring no ranging shots or fire adjustment that would have given us warning of the attack. The destruction inflicted by individual shell hits surpassed anything we had encountered in previous surface engagements. A single 16-inch projectile penetrated the heavy cruiser Otago amidships, exploding inside the machinery spaces and causing immediate flooding that doomed the vessel within minutes. The armor penetration demonstrated by this hit exceeded the theoretical capabilities of any known naval projectile. Hara's report documented the psychological impact of facing firepower beyond Japanese tactical experience. His destroyer, despite its speed and maneuverability, could not close to effective torpedo range while under fire from Iowa-class guns. The combination of extreme range, devastating accuracy, and rapid rate of fire created an engagement envelope where Japanese surface vessels could not respond effectively to American battleship attack. The implications for Japanese naval strategy were profound and immediate. Surface engagements that Japanese doctrine assumed would be decided by superior Japanese night fighting techniques and aggressive close-range attacks had become impossibly one-sided when American battleships could deliver effective fire at ranges where Japanese vessels could not respond. The tactical advantage that had sustained Japanese naval confidence since the beginning of the war had been neutralized by American technological superiority. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, reviewed these engagement reports with growing understanding of the strategic catastrophe facing Japanese naval forces. His headquarters maintained detailed analyses of every surface engagement fought since American battleships had entered Pacific combat operations. The patterns emerging from these analyses made devastating reading for Japanese naval planners. Japanese warships were being destroyed by American naval gunfire at ranges where they could not effectively return fire. American fire control systems, apparently incorporating radar technology beyond Japanese capabilities, achieved first salvo hits that Japanese naval gunnery required multiple salvos to accomplish. American projectiles penetrated armor protection that Japanese naval architects had designed to defeat any known naval weapon. Most fundamentally, American battleships could maintain sustained rates of fire for extended periods without degrading accuracy or mechanical reliability, suggesting superiority in metallurgy, precision manufacturing, and system design that Japanese industry could not match. The 16-inch guns that had destroyed Japanese warships throughout the Central Pacific Campaign represented technological achievements beyond Japanese naval engineering capabilities. The psychological transformation of Japanese naval leadership accelerated through the summer and fall of 1944 as evidence accumulated of American naval technological superiority. These were not tactical defeats that could be attributed to poor leadership or adverse circumstances. These were technological revelations that shattered fundamental assumptions about Japanese naval capabilities and strategic position. Admiral Ugaki's examination of the Kumano damage photographs represented a watershed moment when Japanese naval intelligence could no longer ignore or minimize American battleship capabilities. The physical evidence documented destruction that exceeded anything Japanese naval doctrine had prepared them to counter. Each shell crater told a story of American industrial capacity and technological innovation that Japanese leadership finally understood they could never match. The statistical evidence supported these qualitative assessments with mathematical precision that left no room for optimistic interpretation. American shipyards had completed 4 Iowa-class battleships by early 1944, while simultaneously constructing dozens of other major warships. Japanese naval construction had completed no equivalent vessels during the same period, despite desperate efforts to accelerate production using emergency construction methods. American naval gunnery demonstrated accuracy rates exceeding 80% hits at ranges beyond 30 kilometers, under optimal conditions, performance levels that Japanese naval training had never achieved, even at shorter ranges with more favorable conditions. American fire control systems required no ranging shots or adjustment fire, indicating radar-controlled gunnery that could achieve first salvo accuracy, regardless of visibility or weather conditions. The rate of fire sustained by Iowa-class main batteries exceeded Japanese theoretical calculations of what was mechanically possible using traditional naval gunnery equipment. 2 rounds per gun per minute meant each Iowa-class battleship could fire 1,100 kilogram projectiles every minute for extended periods, creating a volume of fire that no Japanese warship could survive within effective range. When Japanese naval analysts compiled comprehensive assessments of American battleship capabilities in late 1944, the conclusions forced recognition of technological and industrial inferiority that could not be overcome through tactical innovation or operational courage. American naval technology had advanced beyond Japanese comprehension, creating combat advantages that Japanese naval forces could not counter using available equipment and established doctrine. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The examination of those damage photographs in Admiral Ugaki's office represented more than intelligence analysis of enemy capabilities. It constituted recognition that Japanese naval supremacy, the foundation of Pacific strategy since 1941, had been decisively ended by American technological achievements that Japanese science and industry could not match. The Iowa-class battleships had not merely outgunned Japanese naval forces. They had demonstrated American industrial capacity to design, build, and deploy naval technology that rendered Japanese warships obsolete. This recognition would shape Japanese naval strategy for the remainder of the war, forcing abandonment of conventional surface engagement tactics in favor of desperate expedients, including kamikaze attacks and human torpedo missions. But understanding the enemy's technological advantages could not eliminate them or create counters when the industrial capacity and scientific knowledge required were beyond Japanese capabilities. The 16-inch guns that had destroyed Kumano and dozens of other Japanese warships represented American naval technology at its peak, but they also symbolized the industrial civilization that could design and build such weapons while simultaneously fighting global war across multiple theaters. No amount of tactical skill or operational courage could overcome such fundamental technological and industrial disparity. The story of Japanese naval leadership confronting Iowa-class battleship firepower illuminates the decisive advantage that advanced technology provides when deployed at industrial scale against opponents who lack the scientific knowledge, manufacturing capability, and material resources to develop effective counters. It demonstrates the psychological impact of facing enemies who possess capabilities you cannot match, transforming confident warriors into increasingly desperate defenders through the revelation of technological obsolescence. Admiral Ugaki closed the damage assessment folder and walked to his office windows overlooking Tokyo Bay. In the distance, The skeletal remains of bombed shipyards testified to American air superiority, but the photographs he had just examined revealed a more fundamental challenge. The Americans possessed naval firepower beyond anything Japanese naval architecture could counter, delivered by weapons systems beyond Japanese, technological capabilities, produced by industrial capacity beyond Japanese ability to match. The mathematics were irrefutable, the physics unforgiving, the strategic implications inescapable. Understanding American technological advantages could not eliminate them or create effective counters when the resources required were beyond Japanese reach. The examination of a few reconnaissance photographs had revealed the instrument of Japanese naval defeat, technological superiority deployed at industrial scale by an enemy whose scientific and manufacturing capabilities exceeded Japanese comprehension. They would fight on because duty demanded it, and hope dies slowly. But they knew. The evidence of American naval firepower had shown them the future, and it belonged to the nation that could build Iowa-class battleships while simultaneously constructing the largest navy in human history. The revelation accelerated through November 1944 as Japanese naval intelligence compiled comprehensive assessments of every surface engagement involving American battleships. Captain Kameto Kuroshima, Chief of Staff to Admiral Toyoda and one of Japan's most respected naval strategists, supervised the analysis that would become known internally as the Iowa Assessment, a classified document that attempted to quantify exactly what Japanese naval forces faced when confronting American battleship firepower. Kuroshima had served as operations officer during the planning for Pearl Harbor and Midway, making him uniquely qualified to understand the strategic implications of technological disadvantage. His team examined damage reports from every Japanese vessel that had survived encounters with Iowa-class guns, analyzed captured American technical manuals when available, and interviewed every surviving officer who had witnessed American battleship gunnery. The technical specifications they compiled painted a picture of American naval engineering that exceeded Japanese comprehension. The Mark 7 16-inch guns mounted on Iowa-class battleships achieved muzzle velocities of 853 meters per second using standard powder charges, with supercharge capabilities reaching 914 meters per second for extreme range engagements. These velocities imparted kinetic energy sufficient to penetrate any armor protection Japanese naval architects had designed. The armor-piercing capability of American 16-inch projectiles rendered Japanese naval armor obsolete at normal battle ranges. The Mark 8 armor-piercing round could penetrate 762 millimeters of face-hardened steel at 20 kilometers, a performance that exceeded the maximum armor thickness of any Japanese warship by substantial margins. Even the massive Yamato-class battleships, protected by 410 millimeters of armor over vital areas, could not withstand direct hits from Iowa-class guns at typical engagement ranges. More troubling for Japanese tactical planning, the high-explosive rounds fired by these weapons delivered devastating blast effects against lightly armored targets. The Mark 13 high-capacity shell carried 69 kilograms of explosive D, creating blast effects equivalent to large aerial bombs when used against destroyers, cruisers, or shore installations. A single hit from such a projectile could destroy or disable vessels that Japanese doctrine assumed could survive multiple hits from conventional naval artillery. The rate of fire achieved by Iowa-class main batteries challenged Japanese understanding of mechanical engineering limits. American battleships demonstrated sustained firing rates, approaching 2 rounds per gun per minute for extended periods without mechanical failure or accuracy degradation. This performance required precision manufacturing tolerances, advanced metallurgy, and hydraulic systems that Japanese industry had never mastered. Japanese naval engineers calculated that achieving such firing rates required gun barrel life exceeding 300 full-charge rounds, while maintaining accuracy standards throughout the barrel's service life. Japanese naval guns typically showed significant accuracy degradation after 100 to 150 rounds, requiring replacement or rebuilding that removed the weapon from service for weeks or months. The fire control systems directing Iowa-class gunnery incorporated radar technology that Japanese naval science had never approached. American battleships achieved first salvo accuracy at ranges exceeding 30 kilometers in conditions where Japanese optical fire control systems were completely ineffective. The Mark 8 fire control radar could track multiple targets simultaneously while calculating firing solutions that accounted for target movement, wind, temperature, and projectile ballistics. This radar-controlled gunnery eliminated the ranging process that Japanese naval doctrine assumed would provide warning of enemy attack. Traditional naval gunnery required multiple salvos to establish range and bearing, giving the target vessel time to take evasive action or return fire. American fire control achieved accurate first-round hits that destroyed or disabled targets before they could respond effectively. Commander Toshikazu Omei, serving as naval liaison to Imperial General Headquarters, analyzed the tactical implications in classified briefings conducted throughout December 1944. His presentations to senior military leadership provided stark assessments of Japanese naval disadvantage that contradicted years of optimistic planning assumptions. American battleship firepower has rendered conventional surface engagement tactics obsolete, Omei reported to the Joint Chiefs. Japanese warships cannot approach effective torpedo range while under fire from Iowa-class guns. Our optical fire control cannot achieve accuracy comparable to American radar systems. Our armor protection cannot withstand American 16-inch projectiles at any practical engagement range. The psychological impact on Japanese naval officers who read these assessments was profound and immediate. These were not theoretical projections or intelligence estimates derived from questionable sources. These were engineering calculations based on documented combat performance and captured technical data that could not be disputed or dismissed. Captain Atsushi Oi, commanding the light cruiser Oyodo and one of Japan's most experienced gunnery officers, submitted a tactical assessment that captured the despair spreading through Japanese naval leadership. His confidential report, dated December 20, 1944, provided brutal honesty about Japanese prospects in surface combat against American battleships. We have analyzed engagement scenarios assuming optimal conditions for Japanese forces, Oi wrote. Perfect weather, daylight visibility, no air interference, Japanese numerical superiority of 2-1, ideal tactical positioning. Under these completely unrealistic conditions that we will never achieve in actual combat, Japanese surface forces would suffer casualties exceeding 70% while achieving minimal damage to American battleships. Under realistic combat conditions, with American air superiority, radar-controlled gunnery, and our current material disadvantages, survival probability for Japanese surface forces engaging Iowa-class battleships approaches 0. This is not defeatism. This is mathematics based on demonstrated American technological capabilities that we cannot counter with available equipment. The industrial analysis accompanying these tactical assessments revealed the impossibility of Japanese naval recovery through increased production or technological innovation. American shipyards had completed 4 Iowa-class battleships by early 1945, while simultaneously constructing dozens of other major warships, including fleet carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. Japanese naval construction, operating under constant air attack and severe material shortages, had completed no equivalent vessels during the same period, despite emergency construction programs that diverted resources from other critical military needs. The shipyards that had built the Japanese fleet lay in ruins across the home islands, victims of American strategic bombing that had systematically destroyed Japanese industrial capacity. Even if Japanese shipyards could resume full production, which was impossible given the destruction and material shortages, the construction time required for vessels equivalent to Iowa-class battleships exceeded 3 years using Japanese construction methods. American industrial capacity meant that by the time Japan could complete 1 battleship, American shipyards would have delivered 6 or 8 additional vessels of superior capability. The material requirements for matching American naval construction exceeded Japanese access to critical strategic materials. Iowa-class construction required approximately 45,000 tons of steel per vessel, including specialized armor alloys that Japanese metallurgy could not duplicate. The advanced fire control systems demanded electronics components that Japanese industry had never manufactured in quantity. Most critically, The precision manufacturing required for 16-inch guns and their ammunition exceeded Japanese industrial capabilities. American naval artillery achieved accuracy and reliability through manufacturing tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, quality control standards that Japanese industry could not maintain under wartime conditions with increasingly unskilled labor forces. Admiral Koshiro Oikawa, former Navy minister and senior advisor to the Naval General Staff, reviewed these industrial assessments with growing recognition of the catastrophe facing Japanese naval strategy. His position provided access to the most classified intelligence about American industrial capacity and Japanese material limitations. The Americans have achieved naval technological superiority through industrial methods we cannot duplicate, Oikawa informed Emperor Hirohito during private briefings conducted in January 1945. They have solved engineering problems that our best naval architects declared impossible. They have manufactured naval weapons in quantities that exceed our theoretical maximum production under optimal conditions. The ammunition expenditure rates documented during American naval bombardments challenged Japanese understanding of logistics and supply. Iowa-class battleships fired hundreds of 16-inch rounds during individual engagements without apparent concern for ammunition conservation. American logistics could sustain such expenditure rates while maintaining full magazines for subsequent operations. Japanese naval forces, meanwhile, operated under severe ammunition restrictions that limited firing to emergency situations. The industrial capacity that had once supported Japanese naval operations had been systematically destroyed by American strategic bombing, leaving Japanese warships with ammunition reserves measured in dozens of rounds rather than hundreds. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The psychological transformation of Japanese naval leadership accelerated through the winter of 1944 and spring of 1945, as American naval forces conducted systematic bombardments of Japanese positions throughout the Pacific. Each bombardment provided fresh evidence of Iowa-class firepower that exceeded previous estimates of American capabilities. The bombardment of Iwo Jima, beginning February 16, 1945, demonstrated sustained American naval gunfire beyond anything in military history. USS Nevada, USS Idaho, USS Tennessee, and other American battleships fired over 22,000 rounds of major-caliber ammunition during the pre-invasion bombardment, expenditure rates that would have exhausted Japanese ammunition reserves for the entire combined fleet. But it was the performance of USS Missouri during the bombardment of the Japanese mainland that provided Japanese naval leadership with their most devastating assessment of American firepower. On July 15, 1945, Missouri conducted the first battleship bombardment of the Japanese home islands since the war began, targeting industrial facilities near Muraran on Hokkaido. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, the last commander of Japanese carrier forces and one of Japan's most respected naval strategists, observed this bombardment from a command bunker overlooking the target area. His classified report provided Japanese leadership with eyewitness testimony of Iowa-class firepower delivered against Japanese soil. The American battleship engaged targets at ranges exceeding 35 kilometers with accuracy that eliminated individual buildings, Ozawa reported. Each 16-inch projectile created destruction equivalent to large aerial bombs. The sustained rate of fire continued for over 2 hours without degradation in accuracy or apparent mechanical problems. The psychological effect on defending forces was complete demoralization. Soldiers who had withstood months of aerial bombing broke and fled after witnessing naval gunfire of such intensity and precision. The sound alone, described by survivors as continuous thunder, could be heard for dozens of kilometers inland. Ozawa's report documented the systematic destruction of Japanese coastal defenses by naval gunfire that Japanese artillery could not effectively answer. Missouri fired from positions beyond the range of Japanese coastal batteries while delivering pinpoint accuracy against bunkers, gun positions, and supply depots that had been constructed to withstand conventional bombardment. The optical fire control systems that Japanese coastal defenses relied upon could not achieve effective fire at the ranges where American battleships operated. Japanese radar technology, limited by material shortages and technological disadvantage, could not provide targeting accuracy comparable to American systems. Japanese coastal guns, designed to engage enemy vessels at ranges of 10 to 15 kilometers, could not reach targets operating at twice that distance. Captain Koichi Shibasaki, commanding the coastal defense sector at Muroran, submitted a damage assessment that provided quantitative evidence of American firepower effectiveness. His report, classified until after the surrender, documented destruction that exceeded anything Japanese defensive planning had anticipated. 214 16-inch rounds fired during the engagement, Shibasaki reported. 197 confirmed hits on designated targets. Accuracy rate of 92% at ranges exceeding 30 kilometers. 43 defensive positions completely destroyed. 67 additional positions damaged beyond repair. Estimated reconstruction time exceeds 6 months, assuming unlimited labor and material availability. Defending forces suffered approximately 400 casualties from naval gunfire alone. Medical facilities overwhelmed by blast injuries and psychological trauma cases. Morale among surviving personnel assessed as non-functional for continued defensive operations. The implications for Japanese homeland defense were catastrophic beyond anything military planners had contemplated. If single American battleships could achieve such destruction during brief bombardments, what would sustained naval gunfire accomplish during a full-scale invasion? The coastal fortifications that Japanese engineers had spent years constructing could be systematically destroyed by American naval forces, operating beyond the range of effective Japanese response. Admiral Yonai Mitsumasa, serving as Navy Minister during the final months of the war, compiled comprehensive assessments of Japanese naval disadvantage for presentation to the Supreme War Council. His classified briefings provided political leadership with stark recognition of military reality that could no longer be ignored or minimized. American naval superiority has rendered Japanese defensive strategy obsolete, Yonai reported during cabinet meetings in July 1945. Iowa-class battleships can destroy Japanese fortifications from ranges where our weapons cannot respond. American fire control achieves accuracy that eliminates specific targets rather than conducting area bombardments. American ammunition reserves appear unlimited while our stocks are nearly exhausted. Most critically, American naval technology continues advancing while Japanese capabilities decline due to material shortages and industrial destruction. The technological gap increases monthly as American forces deploy improved weapons, while Japanese forces operate with increasingly obsolescent equipment maintained by improvised methods. The statistical evidence supporting these assessments provided mathematical confirmation of technological and industrial defeat. American naval forces had expended over 1 million rounds of major-caliber ammunition during Pacific operations, while maintaining full magazines and continuing operations without apparent supply constraints. Japanese naval forces, by contrast, had been reduced to artillery raids using individual shells carefully husbanded for emergency use. The combined fleet that had once dominated Pacific waters could no longer sustain major surface engagements due to ammunition shortages, fuel restrictions, and the systematic destruction of experienced crews. The accuracy demonstrated by American naval gunfire exceeded Japanese theoretical calculations of what was mechanically possible, using any known fire control technology. Iowa-class battleships achieved first-round hits at extreme ranges, while maintaining high accuracy rates throughout extended engagements, performance that required technological capabilities beyond Japanese comprehension. Japanese naval guns, operating with optical fire control systems and mechanical computers, required multiple ranging salvos to achieve comparable accuracy at shorter ranges. The time required for Japanese gunnery procedures provided American forces with overwhelming tactical advantage during the brief windows when Japanese surface vessels could engage before being destroyed. The rate of fire sustained by American battleships challenged Japanese understanding of metallurgical limits and mechanical engineering. Japanese naval guns showed significant accuracy degradation after sustained firing, requiring barrel replacement or rebuilding that removed weapons from service for extended periods. American naval artillery maintained mechanical reliability and accuracy standards throughout firing sequences that would have destroyed Japanese guns through excessive wear or overheating. This reliability required manufacturing precision and materials science that Japanese industry had never achieved, even under peacetime conditions with unlimited resources. Commander Sadatoshi Tomioka, serving as chief of the Naval General Staff Operations Section, supervised the final classified assessment of American naval capabilities completed in August 1945. His team compiled comprehensive analysis of every aspect of American naval superiority, providing Japanese leadership with definitive recognition of technological defeat. American naval forces possess decisive advantages in every category of combat capability, Tomioka's assessment concluded. Firepower, protection, speed, range, accuracy, reliability, and logistics support all favor American forces by margins that Japanese technological innovation cannot overcome within any realistic time frame. The Iowa-class battleship represents technological achievement beyond Japanese naval engineering capabilities. Attempting to counter such weapons through conventional means would require industrial resources and scientific knowledge that Japan does not possess and cannot acquire under current conditions. Continued resistance against American naval forces equipped with such weapons serves no military purpose and inflicts casualties without achieving strategic objectives. The technological revolution that created these weapons has rendered Japanese naval strategy obsolete and Japanese surface forces incapable of effective resistance. This brutal assessment reached Japanese leadership during the final weeks before surrender, providing confirmation of what many had suspected but none had dared formally acknowledge. The war had been lost not through tactical failures or strategic miscalculations, but through technological obsolescence created by American industrial and scientific capabilities that Japan could never match. The examination of Iowa-class battleship firepower had revealed the instrument of Japanese naval defeat with mathematical precision that admitted no optimistic interpretation. Understanding American technological superiority could not eliminate it or create effective counters when the scientific knowledge and industrial capacity required were beyond Japanese reach. The 16-inch guns that had systematically destroyed Japanese naval forces represented more than superior weapons. They embodied American technological civilization applied to warfare, with results that made continued resistance futile and destructive without purpose. The final reckoning came on September 2, 1945, aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, the officer who had commanded the carrier strike force at Pearl Harbor, stood among Japanese representatives preparing to sign the instrument of surrender. The irony was not lost on him that this ceremony took place aboard an Iowa-class battleship, the very weapon system that had demonstrated Japanese naval obsolescence so decisively. Missouri's 16-inch guns, which had bombarded Japanese positions just weeks earlier, now stood silent as monuments to American technological supremacy. Each turret weighed more than a Japanese destroyer. Each gun could hurl projectiles farther than most Japanese vessels could travel on their remaining fuel reserves. The ammunition stored in Missouri's magazines exceeded the total remaining stockpiles of the entire Japanese Navy. General Douglas MacArthur, accepting Japanese surrender, spoke aboard a vessel that represented everything Japanese naval strategy had failed to anticipate or counter. The Iowa-class battleships had not merely outfought Japanese naval forces. They had rendered Japanese maritime doctrine obsolete through technological capabilities that Japanese science and industry could never have matched. The aftermath of Japanese naval defeat reverberated through every aspect of their military organization and strategic planning. The officers who had examined those damage photographs in October 1944, who had compiled the devastating assessments of American firepower superiority, who had witnessed their most advanced vessels destroyed by weapons beyond their technological comprehension, now faced the reality they had mathematically predicted but emotionally resisted. Captain Kameto Kuroshima, who had supervised the Iowa assessment that documented Japanese technological disadvantage, reflected on the strategic implications in his post-war memoir, published in 1953 under the title The Last Fleet, Japanese Naval Strategy in the Pacific War. His analysis provided historical perspective on the psychological impact of confronting superior technology. We understood by late 1944 that American naval capabilities exceeded our power comprehension, Kuroshima wrote. The Iowa-class battleships represented technological achievement beyond Japanese engineering knowledge. Attempting to counter such weapons using conventional naval doctrine was futile from the beginning. The psychological effect on Japanese naval leadership was profound demoralization, disguised as continued resistance. We knew the war was lost when we first analyzed Iowa-class capabilities, but duty required continued fighting despite mathematical certainty of defeat. The most painful recognition was that American industrial capacity had advanced beyond Japanese ability to compete through any realistic means. We were attempting to fight an industrial civilization using craft production methods that belonged to an earlier era of warfare. The statistical accounting of Japanese naval losses confirmed the decisive impact of American technological superiority. Of the approximately 300 major Japanese warships that served during the Pacific War, including battleships, aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers, fewer than 40 survived to surrender in September 1945. The remainder had been destroyed by American forces, equipped with technological advantages that Japanese naval doctrine had never anticipated. Iowa-class battleships alone accounted for the destruction or disabling of dozens of Japanese warships through direct naval gunfire, but their broader strategic impact extended far beyond individual engagements. The knowledge that American naval forces possessed such overwhelming firepower superiority forced Japanese strategy into increasingly desperate expedients that hastened overall defeat. The kamikaze attacks that characterized Japanese naval operations in 1945 represented recognition that conventional surface engagement against Iowa-class firepower was suicidal without achieving military objectives. If Japanese vessels could not survive long enough to engage American battleships ineffectively, then converting them into guided missiles, carrying explosive payloads at least offered some possibility of inflicting damage before inevitable destruction. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, who had commanded Japanese surface forces during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, provided post-war testimony about the psychological impact of facing Iowa-class battleships during that engagement. His account, recorded during Allied interrogation in 1946, captured the desperation that drove Japanese tactical decisions. When our force encountered American battleships off Samar, we understood immediately that conventional surface engagement was impossible, Kurita testified. The range and accuracy of their guns exceeded anything we could counter with available weapons. Our only option was closing to torpedo range, but this required surviving concentrated fire from multiple Iowa-class vessels. The decision to withdraw was not cowardice, but recognition of reality. Losing our entire force without achieving military objectives served no strategic purpose. The Americans possessed naval technology that made our weapons obsolete. The human cost of Japanese naval defeat reflected the broader tragedy of technological warfare between unequal opponents. Of the approximately 400,000 officers and men who served in the Japanese Navy during the Pacific War, approximately 250,000 died in combat or from combat-related causes. This 62% casualty rate represented one of the highest military loss rates of any major combatant. These men died fighting against technological superiority they could not overcome, through courage, skill, or tactical innovation. They faced weapons systems beyond their ability to counter using available equipment and established doctrine. Their sacrifice achieved no strategic objectives and prevented no military defeats, serving only to prolong inevitable surrender at the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the air attack on Pearl Harbor and survived to witness Japanese surrender, reflected on the technological revolution that had determined the war's outcome. His post-war writings provided perspective on the psychological transformation of Japanese military leadership from confident superiority to desperate resistance. The Americans achieved naval technological supremacy through industrial methods we never understood, Fuchida wrote in his 1951 memoir, From Pearl Harbor to Calvary. They solved engineering problems that our best naval architects declared impossible. they manufactured weapons in quantities that exceeded our maximum theoretical production under optimal conditions. The Iowa-class battleship represented not just superior naval architecture, but complete American industrial civilization applied to warfare. Every aspect of these vessels demonstrated technological capabilities beyond Japanese reach. Fighting against such weapons was like fighting against the future itself. The legacy of Japanese naval defeat extended far beyond the immediate military consequences. The recognition that Japanese technology had been comprehensively surpassed by American capabilities influenced post-war Japanese industrial development and scientific education. The nation that had once possessed the world's third-largest navy dedicated itself to understanding and mastering the technological methods that had created American military superiority. Japanese naval officers who survived the war, including many who had personally witnessed Iowa-class firepower, became advocates for technological education and industrial modernization. They understood that future Japanese security required mastering the scientific and engineering capabilities that American naval forces had demonstrated so decisively. The shipyards that had built the Japanese fleet were rebuilt using American industrial methods and technological assistance. The naval academies that had trained Japanese officers restructured their curricula to emphasize technological innovation and industrial capacity as the foundations of naval power. The steel mills that had forged Japanese naval armor adopted American metallurgical techniques that could produce materials superior to anything Japanese science had achieved. The precision manufacturing required for advanced naval weapons became a Japanese national priority, leading to industrial capabilities that eventually exceeded their former technological superiors. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, the last wartime commander of the combined fleet, survived to witness Japan's post-war industrial transformation. His final writings, published shortly before his death in 1957, provided historical perspective on the technological revolution that had ended Japanese naval power and begun Japan's industrial renaissance. The Iowa-class battleships taught us that naval warfare had become technological warfare, where industrial capacity determined outcomes, Toyoda wrote. We learned that fighting against superior technology without possessing the industrial base to match or counter it was futile, regardless of tactical skill or operational courage. But we also learned that technological capabilities could be acquired through systematic study and industrial development. The Americans who defeated us also taught us the methods they had used to achieve technological superiority. Our post-war recovery applied those lessons to peaceful purposes. The final irony of Japanese naval defeat was that the technology that had destroyed their fleet eventually became the foundation for their industrial recovery. The precision manufacturing techniques required for Iowa-class guns became the basis for Japanese automotive and electronics industries. The metallurgical advances that had created American naval armor became Japanese steel production methods. The quality control standards that had enabled American naval supremacy became Japanese industrial practices. The 16-inch guns of USS Missouri, which had silenced Japanese coastal defenses in 1945, had also silenced Japanese military resistance to technological modernization. The psychological impact of facing weapons beyond their ability to counter forced Japanese leadership to abandon technological complacency and embrace systematic industrial development. By 1960, Japanese shipyards were building vessels that incorporated technological advances beyond anything achieved during the war. Japanese steel production exceeded wartime American levels using methods originally developed for naval armor manufacturing. Japanese precision manufacturing achieved tolerances that surpassed wartime American naval gun production. The nation that had been defeated by superior technology had learned to master that technology and advance beyond it. The psychological transformation that began with Admiral Ugaki examining damage photographs in October 1944 had culminated in Japan becoming a technological leader rather than follower. The story of Japanese admirals confronting Iowa-class battleship firepower represents more than military history or technological competition. It illustrates the decisive advantage that advanced technology provides when deployed at industrial scale against opponents who lack the scientific knowledge and manufacturing capability to develop effective counters. It demonstrates the psychological impact of facing enemies who possess capabilities you cannot match, transforming confident warriors into increasingly desperate defenders through the revelation of technological obsolescence. Most fundamentally, it shows how the recognition of technological inferiority can become the foundation for technological advancement when nations choose learning over denial. The copper and steel that had formed Iowa-class battleships represented American industrial civilization at its peak. But the knowledge and methods that had created those weapons eventually spread to former enemies who learned to apply them for peaceful purposes. The technology that had ended one era of warfare became the foundation for an era of unprecedented technological cooperation and advancement. The 16-inch guns had spoken with mathematical finality about the outcome of technological competition, but their ultimate lesson was not about destruction, but about the transformative power of knowledge systematically applied to industrial development. The nation that had been taught its technological limitations by superior weapons chose to learn rather than remain limited. He died in the final kamikaze attack of the war on August 15, 1945, choosing to follow his emperor's example rather than witness complete defeat. But his examination of those damage photographs in October 1944 had begun the psychological process that would eventually transform Japan from technological follower to technological leader. The mathematical precision of American naval gunfire had taught final lessons about the relationship between scientific knowledge, industrial capacity, and military power. Those lessons, learned through devastating defeat, became the foundation for one of history's most remarkable technological transformations. The sound of 16-inch guns had announced the end of one era and the beginning of another. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.